Again, yes, I'm Brad Parks, and Washed Ashore has been around for 12 years. We are located and we're founded on the southern coast of Oregon in Bandon, and I believe that's the connection to Dixie. She was visiting Southern Oregon and happened to come into our gallery. So we have some sculptures there that are visible to the public. And this is the ocean and the scenes that actually inspired the work by our founder 12 years ago. And we continue to grow and work on this issue in different ways. And also now are in Coos Bay, which is a little bit north of there. And I'll be showing you some images and talking about the work that's centered here in this part of Oregon that's actually closer to California than Portland. So some of you may be familiar with that city. We're actually much closer to the California border. So it's a beautiful part of the country. So the ocean is what makes our planet so unique, from the warm tropical reefs to the cold polar, southern and northern poles. It's home to the largest creatures that our planet has ever known that actually feed on and feast on and survive on some of the smallest. There's complex food webs here that have amazing iconic top predators like sharks, as well as it is the home of some of the most amazingly weird and wonderful creatures that we have on this planet. This is a weedy sea dragon, a type of seahorse that's found in the Pacific, the warm tropical reefs there. So as you take a peek again at our Oregon coast, this is an amazing, incredible place for us to be. The ocean is such an amazing aspect of our planet, makes us so unique among all the others that right now we know of. But when you look a little bit closer, unfortunately, you see this. And that's the plastic that we created just 6 decades or so ago. Actually, no, 6 decades or so ago, but now has become this overwhelming problem as it really doesn't go away. It will break apart, but never really break down, at least so far in our history of it. But this product is actually impacting wildlife and human health even in a couple of key ways. And so first, regarding the wildlife, it can unfortunately entangle creatures. So this sea turtle has actually sadly been entangled in a net. The other way that you may be aware that wildlife is impacted by the plastic is through ingesting it. So this way is one aspect where turtles mistakenly think that these plastic bags are jellies, sea jellies or jellyfish, and then ingest them and impact them directly. But what's also happening is many other creatures are mistaking plastic in the water as it breaks apart and becomes smaller and smaller. Depending on the creature, they misidentify it as food and ingest it. And unfortunately, as you may imagine, it doesn't always leave their systems and can cause malnutrition, impact them lethally. And unfortunately, as we look at the human food chain, as many of us love seafood, the same creatures that we love to eat also are now putting plastic into us as we ingest them. So this issue is a complex one, of course, and we think about global systems, and this is really where the ocean touches all of us. It's one large biome that encompasses the earth. And I did forget, you're welcome to use the chat. If something comes up, if you have a question or something I say needs clarification, feel free to put it in there. We'll have time at the end as I go through these numbers, especially that may come to mind. But right now, the figures that we're finding, Washed Ashore is finding, is that daily, so I'll say that again, daily, 8 to 11 million pieces of plastic waste end up in the ocean around the globe. So for me, that, and most people, I'm sure, is quite a big number to comprehend. And so we worked on some math and discovered that that's like a garbage truck full of plastic emptying into the ocean every minute, all day long. So if you think of that volume every minute, it takes about a minute, right, for the truck to upend and empty. You think about that. That's what's the sources all around the world are emptying into the ocean. So this is a constant problem and a constant issue. Well, where is it coming from? Most of the sources are actually coming from inland rivers, waterways, and along the coast. So this is something that is coming and emanating from all of us humans on the land. And in fact, speaking to people like you who are far upstream are actually important, because we don't consider it, but that plastic that's in a big box parking lot somewhere there in your community that goes into the storm drain inadvertently ends up going and flowing, as 33 states do, into the Mississippi on the east coast of the and central part of the US, and ending up all into the Gulf, for example, just here in the United States. So 80% again coming from inland rivers, waterways, and coasts. And those can be all sizes and pieces, but the issue is immense. It's also something obviously in other countries that's happening, and depending on their rules and regulations, sometimes it's even deliberately gotten rid of by putting into waterways and oceans. Whereas 20% is coming from places like ships and fishing materials that are actually out in the ocean itself. Sadly, as we are now in year 3 of this pandemic, or coming into year 3, it's only worsened the ocean plastic issue. This image was pretty startling, and it's one that was a 2021 photo of the year. This little seahorse, as they naturally do, grabs on with its grasping tail, and typically it's seagrasses or corals or things like that. But in this case, unfortunately, it was a discarded mask. And when you look at the pandemic, not only were there things like masks and gloves that were part of the plastic pollution issue from the pandemic, but many, many things went into the 8 million tons of pandemic-related plastic waste that were created in this little window of time I have here on the screen. If you think about that, that's not only things in this number were not only masks and gloves, but also testing kits and equipment that was used in hospitals around the globe to actually treat people with COVID. Obviously, plastic has benefits where it can be sanitized and not reused to spread disease, but in fact prevent it by being used once and being gotten rid of. Also, if you think about takeout containers and styrofoam cups that were used at that period to help us, keep restaurants going, as well as packaging. Lots of packaging, unfortunately, as we couldn't shop in regular stores and we were shopping online. All of that contributed to this number, and the studies that we looked at found that 26,000 tons in that short window of time also ended up in the ocean, making this problem even worse than it already was. So, what is Washed Ashore doing to try and look at how we can inspire people to become not only aware of the problem, but take a role in stopping it or reflecting on it and making personal choices to eliminate plastic, which is our goal. I'll share our mission in a moment. But what are we doing? This short video will share a bit about us. It's like 2.5 minutes. I think I have the sound on. I apologize if I don't, but let me just see.
Everything we do out of a deep love and respect for the ocean and the diversity of life it supports. Every day, 8 million pieces of plastic make their way into our oceans, with an estimated total of 5.25 million pieces severely impacting marine life. The Washed Ashore project pulls tons of discarded plastics from beaches and waterways and turns them into monumental public artworks that challenges the viewer to see the scale of the plastic pollution problem and inspires them to change their consumer habits. Washed Ashore attracts visitors and volunteers from around the world. Over 35 tons of plastics have been turned into 86 sculptures, representing endangered species that become traveling exhibits that educate about plastic pollution in zoos, aquariums, botanical gardens, malls, and even at the Smithsonian and UN. More than 14,000 volunteers from across the country have helped with every stage of Washed Ashore sculptures, gathering and cleaning debris, sorting it by size and color, assembling components all for the single purpose to educate through art. At Washed Ashore, we want to inspire people to be change makers, whether it's using a reusable drink bottle or picking up a few pieces of trash every time you visit the beach. Just do one thing. Lots of little things can add up to a big difference. Washed Ashore, art to save the sea.
So first and foremost, we're about ocean conservation through art. And so this piece you're seeing here is a close-up of Octavia, our giant red Pacific octopus. And so first and foremost, we're working to create beautiful art. I'm going to share the process that we go about to do that. But in the end, it's not just for art's sake. We really are creating art to achieve our mission and are working toward then changing behaviors, changing the way we interact with the planet, the way we purchase individually and collectively to make an impact on this plastic pollution problem. So it starts with volunteers. We are really based in Southern Oregon, but the coast is where all of our plastic actually is collected. Groups like this going out on cleanups are one way that happens. We have some great organizations there that are ocean conservation nonprofits that do cleanups in the spring and fall in particular. And then those materials are then shared with us. We are able to use about 70 to 75% of everything. So if you think about a plastic wrapper, for example, from produce or some other food source, those types of things just break down and or break apart and really are not strong enough to be used in a sculpture. So that then goes into our own regional landfill waste. But we are able to use typically around 75% of what's collected. The other sources then come from some park rangers. Oregon's coast is largely protected as state parks. And so there's some rangers who are able to specifically collect things for us. And then a few times a year, we go up and pick up the items they have stashed for us. And then this bin on the right side is an example of where just community members can pick things up when they're out and bring them, and we collect those from time to time. It really is part of where we see this is something everyone can contribute to. So no matter what your age or your ability, everyone uses plastic every day in their life, or at least almost everyone, and certainly everyone can make a difference in this issue. And so using volunteers from the beginning and throughout the process, you'll see, is a way that that's reinforced. This is another area where volunteers help us. This is outside of our workshop in Coos Bay, our studio, where things have to be cleaned. So once they're pulled from the beach, they're sorted. We use vinegar-based solutions to kill anything that might be on them. We use normal detergents to then clean them and get any sort of residues, oils, chemicals, anything off of them, and then they become art supplies. And so I love images like this to share because this is what the beach cleanups look like. One of the things the video would have shared is that Washed Ashore, in our 11-year history, we're moving into year 12, we have cleaned up or collected over 35 tons. So 35 tons of trash from the Oregon beaches, and we created over 85 sculptures. So this is an example of what that waste looks like once it's treated. I love it because it's sorted by color. And you can imagine then that's the best way to organize your art supplies if you're a sculptor is by color. And so you can see some recognizable things there. There's kayaks, surfboards, clothes baskets, construction or road pylons and cones and things like that that end up getting blown off into the water. Ironically, even someone's recycling bin. But all of these larger items are organized. But what I find really fascinating is the smaller bins. So this is an example of some greens, blues in particular. But all of these items are kept and sorted once they're cleaned because they really then allow the artist to look at textures and compose the creatures or the habitats in unique ways that allow us to really, again, make sure that the art is as creative and beautiful as possible first. When we do either have a commission or are working on a new piece, we start with a concept and research that species. We have to date created only creatures that are found either in waterways or in the ocean. This is a tiger rockfish that's under creation that is complete, and I'm using it as an example. This is sort of a bird's eye view in our workshop in Coos Bay, Oregon. And you'll see then once a design has been created and a sketch and we research the species, then our lead artist also looks at working with a welder to create a stainless steel frame that serves as the skeleton. So even our invertebrates have skeletons in this case because everything has some type of frame inside of it. Then you'll see that we upcycle used race car tires. So the strips of black you see on the body are actually tires that we slice up and apply that would otherwise end up in the landfill. So those create a really strong base for the other plastic then to be screwed into. So the things that are not coming from the ocean would be the metal for the frame, the race car tires, and then the screws that we use to adhere them. Wire and hardware cloth are examples too, you'll see in a moment. But everything else visually you see on these sculptures has been collected from the beach and pulled from the ocean in different ways to then be part of the sculpture. This gives you a sense of the scale too. You can see the artist's legs in the background as he's walking behind it. This one was one of our biggest pieces. This is in our workshop then in Bandon. This may be familiar to Dixie. I don't know if you contributed to making one of the pieces, but here, as my cursor goes around, is an example of a small piece. And if you think of quilting, our work is similar to that. We have volunteers come in. This gentleman is holding a piece up as well that shows you a different, smaller concept of it. But volunteers can come into our workshop and work on different aspects of a sculpture. And so in this case, the artist selected the types and colors of plastic they wanted people to use. They gave an example of the pattern. We have an image of the creature that you're creating. And then people get to use their own creativity to create a panel that then the artist will select to attach to the outside of the sculpture. And so again, another way volunteers contribute to the success of what we're doing and engage in this issue as they contribute to the actual works we're creating. Another thing that our artists really wanted to do when our founder created Washed Ashore was make monumental pieces to really bring the scale and scope of this plastic pollution problem around the world to people in huge sculptures. So it does make them difficult to move around the country. We do that as a main aspect. But right now, another thing that we do is create them with eyes that sort of capture your attention. And these whimsical creatures bring this really ugly problem to you in a beautiful way. They are more attractive in the images earlier of the turtles being damaged or impacted by the plastic are so jarring. This is a different way to sort of introduce the problem in a friendlier way that is artistically appealing, but doesn't skimp on the actual aspect of this is a huge global problem. Here's the eye of the rockfish. The other thing we do then is cover the exterior of each sculpture with recognizable items. So no matter your age or where you come from, you'll see something that relates to you in your own life that is plastic, that then is part of the messaging and the concept of how do we then reduce or eliminate that in our own lives. Each graphic that accompanies sculpture has a quote unquote I spy, where no matter the age, it's fun to try and see the things listed such as scissor handles or a sand toy or a dustpan, and then look for them on the sculpture as you engage with it. Here's a completed version then in the Port of Bandon. So this is new, and this is a permanent piece that's down in our hometown of Bandon, Oregon, along the harbor. And this rockfish then, again, looking at the way to involve the community and help people become engaged. The local high school is the Bandon Tigers. We created a tiger rockfish in their honor. They were able to name it, and they named it Finian in honor of one of their fellow students who sadly passed away this past year. And so it not only honors him, but I love the fact that their fins are so amazing on a rockfish. And so Finian is now someone new you can visit, even if the gallery is closed for some reason. We're not open every day there in Bandon. You can see one of our pieces down there on the harbor. So why do we do it? In the end is really to inspire ocean conservation, one sculpture at a time, to make behavior change. So individual efforts to reduce plastic pollution are really what we're all about. But in a group such as yourself today, there may be things that even you could do collectively that might make an impact in your community that will impact the problem in a bigger way. So I always like to try and imagine what's one way you can replace single-use plastics in your daily life. One of the things I have been challenging myself with, for example, is toothpaste containers and toothbrushes. So there's a variety of things out there, but that's sort of my next step. I have the water bottle, and I'm guessing many of you do if you're interested in this solution already, or you have the shopping bags you take into the grocery store, so you're not using those regularly, but really challenging folks to look at what else can I do? And so the other way that when I speak to folks, I think about is many of you may have businesses. You may be business leaders in your community or part of organization where you can look at this issue and make a bigger impact in your community to share this message and help protect our waterways and oceans. This sculpture is Priscilla, by the way. She's a parrotfish, rainbow parrotfish, and is one of the more colorful ones. It is an interesting thing when you think about it that some colors of plastic are pretty rare. The purples and pinks you see on the top of her snout there may have been collected for 3 to 5 years in order to have that volume of colorful plastic, because some things like blues, blacks, grays, whites, greens are much more common in production. And then other colors such as those pinks and purples are less abundant, as well as brown. When you start looking around, there's our cocoa containers. If you're a baker, that's one of the brown things, sometimes peanut butter lids. But brown really isn't a very common color either. So our river otter, our sea lion, and the creatures like our bald eagle, those sculptures have taken many more years to collect the type of plastic that would take to do versus something like the whites in our big seal. But in the end, the message that we want to share is that really not only are we turning plastic waste into art together, that this problem is really something that everyone can contribute to. So I want to thank you for protecting the ocean, our inspiration at Washed Ashore, with your interest in this topic and hosting me this morning, because really that's what it's all about, is everyone doing their part to make a bigger impact. So with that, I do want to give you a bigger view of Octavia, the octopus that I shared earlier, a glimpse of our team that I'm representing, as well as our website there, washedashore.org, where you can find that video that I will definitely look at how to get to the original audio settings on. But now I would love to hear from you and take your questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and come back to all of you. Hopefully you've gotten the washedashore.org. There's my contact information as well.